Okay, good morning again. Lieutenant Coates, if you were tuned in for the first presentation, you'll know that there was some technical difficulties with getting ForeFlight to be able to screen share. I have since found out that the BlackBerry UEM does not like me doing that, so I'm going to do this quasi offline in an attempt to actually be able to present ForeFlight to you guys. So this is going to be just an overview of some basic operation of ForeFlight and some of the requirements for it to work properly. This is again going to be super basic, but tomorrow, as long as I can get it figured out from a technological standpoint, there's going to be one that's a little more in-depth, and I'll cover some of the topics for that later on. Here's what we're going to go over. Software, current iOS, ForeFlight, and Stratus. Some basic ForeFlight settings that I think most people are using. Tab bar navigation. Hopefully I can get into a ForeFlight demo. I'll talk a little bit about what is next for this software as it pertains to flying in St. Joe. And then obviously there's not going to be any questions here, but feel free to text, call, email, however you want to get a hold of me, and I'll try to get you an answer. Software. So the current iPad OS is 14.3. If you are not on 14.3, please update your iPad. We talked a little bit about issues with the UEM client in the first meeting this morning. I won't dive into it now. But issues with connectivity since 14.0. This has been an issue not just with St. Joe, but nationwide with anybody that's using ForeFlight. So iOS 14 launched back in September, and since then a lot of people have seen issues with their Stratus not wanting to communicate with their iPad. So we've all seen settings for GPS locations and tracking information that have been coming up for the past few years, but iOS 14 took it a little bit farther and started to restrict which apps can connect to a local network. So not just a GPS network, but local networks like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. So what this means is that for certain hardware to talk to your iPad, you're going to have to grant permission to it. So what does this mean for us? If you are trying to hook up to your Stratus and it says that you're connected, Stratus lights are all showing green, then it may mean that you need to, and you're not getting any communication, so no in-flight data, no GPS altitude, etc. You need to grant ForeFlight access to establish a local network, and you do that here with that third bullet down. So you go into your iPad settings, ForeFlight will be toward the bottom left of the screen, and then you go up to local network, slide the bar to make sure that that's enabled, and that will allow your iPad to talk to the Stratus on a local network. As far as ForeFlight MFB, military flight bag, current version 12.9.2. I covered a little bit about the MFB plan attributes this morning. I'm not going to run through that again, but if you're not on ForeFlight 12.9.2, go into Work Apps and then download the latest version. The Stratus firmware is shown here. That'll be for some of us younger guys in tactics to make sure that that is up to date. Settings. I'm actually going to dive into this a little bit now since I should be able to show you what's going on. So the app theme, which is the light and dark that you see on ForeFlight, is great most of the time if you want to just manually switch that. What I've been doing is putting it to system, and when we dive in I'll show you what that means. But basically it's going to use the ambient light sensor on your iPad to be able to determine if ForeFlight wants to be in light mode or dark mode. You do have the option to change the orientation of your map. I prefer to keep mine north up, but some guys are different. They want to see their either track up or track centered, but we can get into that a little bit when we jump over to ForeFlight. Other good things to enable: runway extended center lines and breadcrumbs. And then I wanted to keep this in the slide, but I will talk about it when we swap over. This is the format that will match up to skins. So degrees, minutes, and decimal minutes. Tab bar navigation. So the tab bar is highlighted down below in red. It's those 6 tabs down there. ForeFlight ships with pretty good defaults, but you are not tied to those if you want to change them like I did. And here's how. So that yellow box, more, up to the top, edit tab order, and then the second snip over there outlined in blue are those elevator tabs. Whichever tabs you want displayed in those bottom 6 spots on the left image, you put in the top 6 spots there, and then those will be what you're showing in your tab bar. The 6 that I prefer are airports, maps, plates, documents, custom content, and flights. And I'll show you why here shortly. All right, hopefully this is gonna work. Into ForeFlight, looks good so far. So, before I dive into that, let me show you the local network. Down here on the left, ForeFlight, local network, right here. You want it enabled like that. And that should fix any communication issues that you're having with your Stratus, as long as everything is up to date. All right, sorry about that. Back to ForeFlight. ForeFlight settings down here, bottom right, more settings. Start up here at the top. This is that app theme that I was talking about. So right now I've got it in light for this presentation, but if you swap this over here to system, it will transition between light and dark based on the system appearance settings. So it's going to use your iPad ambient light sensor to determine what the app theme should be. So this is kind of useful, especially if you're going to be doing like an NVG flight, you're inside and planning, you've got fluorescent lights everywhere, your iPad's going to want to be on light mode, and then you get out to the plane. And if you just have light mode enabled, you're going to turn it on when everybody's under nogs and blind everybody. But if you have it on system, it's going to automatically transition to the dark mode. Down here, the auto center mode, this is what I was talking about. I prefer to have mine on north up, but depending on how you want the map oriented, you can play around with this and see it in relation to your direction of flight. Extended center lines, I've got these enabled, and I'll show you what those are here in just a second, but I think it's a great SA tool to see where you are in relation to the extended center line of whatever active runway you're going to. Breadcrumbs, down here toward the bottom, 4th from the bottom. I've got those enabled, and then I have them clear after 2 hours. Breadcrumbs right there is what I'm talking about. So the breadcrumbs, I think they're a great debrief tool because they're going to show you your no kidding ground track as compared to a planned routing. So when you get back on the ground speed 0, you can look and actually measure the distance from where you're supposed to be to where you really were. You can look at the ground track from an approach that you did, any number of things if you have those breadcrumbs enabled. And then the last setting that I want to talk about, I know there's a ton of settings here. Most of these are all default as far as I know, but down here under preferences, if you go to units and time, 4th one from the bottom, coordinates, this is what I was talking about with the degrees, minutes, and decimal minutes. If you select that format, then the coordinates that ForeFlight is going to spit out are going to match up with what you see in skins. So if you need to quickly input lat longs into skins, that is the easiest way for it to look. All right, I'm just going to kind of go through the tabs that I have. down here, I will show you briefly. So here's bottom right, more, edit tab, order, custom content. You can move this around however you want to move these. And then, like I said, the top 6 there are what's going to display in your tab bar. So running through the airports, if you look toward the top here in the information display, a couple pretty useful things, I think, that maybe not everybody has seen before. So right there below the lat long for Rosecrans, you'll see sunrise and sunset, which is very useful for any of us planning NVG stuff. You've got the latest weather, elevation, pattern altitude, and if you go into the pattern altitude, there's an arrow to the right there. It's actually going to give you different pattern altitudes based on your category of aircraft. So heavy's 2327, light 1827, and any helos 1327. Fuel, different procedures that are there, frequencies. I'm not going to run through this. Everybody can play with these different tabs through here, but there's a litany of information just on that airports tab. Maps, I could probably spend an entire day just going through things on this tab, but I'm just going to give you a quick example of some of the neat things that ForeFlight offers to us that maybe some of you are not familiar with. So I've typed in just a short flight here from St. Joe to St. Louis. On the top right, if you click on procedure, we can then go to departure out of KSTJ, and we can zoom in and say, okay, we're going to go to the southeast. It looks like the Lakes 3 departure is the one that I'm going to want. I can select that. It's going to ask you for a transition. To me, it looks like this Columbia transition is probably going to be the best, and it will automatically, I say automatically, Lakes 3, Columbia, I'm sorry, down here, bottom left, add to route. It'll drop that right in to the planning window up there, and then you can figure out routing if you want after that, or there's also arrivals into St. Louis. You can look at that. Yep, probably going to be the coupe with this transition, add a route. Nope, that wasn't it. The easier way to do all this, KSTJ, KSTL. ForeFlight is going to give you, in the routes over here, right below procedures, the route advisor. Right at the top, it's going to give you a recommended route. This is the one that I meant to click on before. It's going to give you a suggested altitude based on winds, direction of travel, all kinds of stuff, but it's automatically going to spit out the route that it thinks is best based on the landing runway and the departure runway for that particular flight. If anybody has any questions about that, I know I stumbled through the procedure a little bit there, but feel free to let me know and I can dive a little bit more into this. There's so much more that I'm just not gonna get covered in this quick session today, but lots of stuff there. Plates tab down at the bottom. This is basically your most used plates. So I just came home from deployment. As you can see, we did a lot of flights into the Deed or Beale and Assad, so I like to have those plates easily accessible, and anything that you save in here is just 2 clicks away. Documents tab. There is a lot of great stuff here. ForeFlight MFB has DoD Flip integrated, so for instance, if you want to go into the AP1, 1A, 1B, etc., it's all right there in ForeFlight. They keep it updated. You just have to click a button to make sure that it's the current one. ForeFlight also has a ton of great references in there as well. I know what a lot of people do is once they send their this up to flights, which I'll cover a little bit more tomorrow on the advanced briefing, but you can send this to flights, and then right here with the green cloud toward the top, briefing, it's going to generate a briefing for this flight I'm not going to wait for it all to download today, but it's pretty close now. That was pretty quick. So once you get this briefing, I believe this is the Holt House trick here. I'll get with him, but there's a way that you can then import that over to your documents and then have those readily available in flight, so it'll download them for use offline. Custom content, this is going to get covered a little bit more for the briefing tomorrow, but you do have the ability to go in and input user waypoints for all the deployers out there. All these points probably look very familiar. I had them all in there so that they were easily accessible. So for instance, if they were going to send us to Zulu, and Zulu is not a point in the system, that's going to send it all the way over to point Zulu. So that basically just gives your iPad a way to look up a point that is not in the GPS reference library. And then flights, I'm going to get into this a little bit more tomorrow as far as filing 1801s. There was some talk this morning about what we need to do to streamline that process a little bit. And there are some really great tools out there. So tomorrow's session, I'm going to cover some 3D views and how we can use that as a pre-flight planning and in-flight visualization tool, overlaying approaches, stars, departure selection, some tools that I use in or out that are pretty handy, and then overlaying local low-level charts onto the moving map and how we can use those for all of our local flights. And then filing 1801s through ForeFlight. That is kind of a big hurdle that we have to figure out. I think there's a lot of opportunity to streamline that a little bit, but we'll get there. Then long term, ForeFlight offers a basically with their Performance Plus plan, they have what's called Enhanced 3D Review. So Enhanced 3D Review, I doubt that this link that I have here is going to work, but if you want to go on YouTube, there's a really great video that details what it is. The long and the short of it is that you can plan a flight and then hit play and watch a full-blown 3D simulation of where our plane will be in relation to a 3D terrain map. So this isn't really the forum to get into why that is beneficial to us, but from a tactics standpoint, I think that would be some awesome pre-flight planning software, as well as if we can integrate it with AHRS at some point in the future. It's a great debrief tool. It'll give you all your airspeeds, bank angles, etc. at any point throughout your flight. So that could be something that we see in the future. And then ForeFlight Dispatch. I talked a little bit about 1801s and some of the issues that we've had getting things filed. So ForeFlight Dispatch allow our SOF basically to file any single ship or formation flight plans. It automatically orders weather. It'll spit out all your route data, everything, and then he or she can seamlessly share all of that to everybody that's flying in the formation so that everybody has the same information, everybody's on the same page. I think it's probably the way forward for our squadron in regard to getting weather and filing flight plans. So with that being said, I know this is just me talking to myself right now, but if you have some questions or if you have ideas on what you would want to see for a presentation tomorrow, please feel free to text, email, call, whatever you want to do to get a hold of me. And if I don't know the answer, I will get you the answer.